Facebook. And if I can find the window, we are going to go live, hopefully on WaveTalkers. And then
here comes the waiting rooms filling up again. I got it.
Yep. Cool. Thank you. Let's see. WaveTalkers. For some reason, stream is not being super happy.
So welcome all as you continue to join the room. If you wouldn't mind, take a moment and rename yourself with your first name and your call sign. It'll better help us track you all. And if you don't know how to do that, up in the corner here, there's 3 little dots. If you click the 3 little dots and pick the item that says rename, then you can make your name look just kind of like mine, your first name and your call sign. And stand by, we'll get started in just a few minutes.
We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on WaveTalkers. Double check all of the other socials here very quickly. You will not need a microphone for this until the Q&A session down at the very end, so you should be okay there.
Hey, what's up, man? Are you gonna be part of the show? Say hi to everybody.
We are.
What's that kitty's name?
This one's Minnie.
Ourselves connected.
Minnie like mouse.
Mm-hmm.
2 N's and an I and an E. All right, you can go find somebody else. Get a hobby. There you go. Thank you.
All right, we are live on YouTube and we're live on Facebook. Excellent. So,
feel the power. Feel the power.
Yeah,
all right, we're up to 85 people. If y'all can see in the chat room, we've asked you to go in there and update your name to your first name and your call sign. And all you need to do is go look in the upper corner. There's 3 dots there. If you click on those 3 dots, it'll pull down a menu. And there's an option to rename. And then if you rename in the model of what I've got there, your first name and your call sign, that'd be great. It'll help us track you and know who's here. And we'll get started in just a couple of minutes.
Excellent. As folks are coming in, just a couple of notes. First of all, we're going to have everybody muted that's inside of the Zoom session. Please make sure that you can open up the chat. Open up the chat and let us know who you are, what's your name, what's your call sign, where you're connecting from. We are going to be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions that you would like to ask during the session, we'll have an open Q&A session at the end of the session. For those of you inside of the Zoom, if you can go ahead and just click on the little more button down at the bottom, or there's a reactions button down at the bottom, and inside of there, if you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand. You can also give like applause and all those fun things as well inside of the Zoom. And great. So as we are doing that, we've got 90 participants so far inside of the live session. We're expecting this session to completely fill to capacity. So let's see, we've got Joe, KB9LXH, hello, coming in from Kentucky. We've got Kit, KC7KIT from Git Harbor, Washington. Mark, Anderson, another Mark, Joel, hello from Central New Jersey, that would be Harry. Richard coming in from Lakeside, Dawn coming in from Reno, Nevada. We have about 35 different states that are joining us here in the live session on Zoom. And we also have participants joining us from our neighbors up in Canada as well in here. So with that, it looks like we're really filling up the room here. So with that, I will turn it over to David, KK6DA, to do a couple of introductions of those of us here in the group, and we'll just go ahead and get started with this.
Chris, thank you, and welcome everybody. We are just blown away at the interest that this course, which we've done, 4 or 5 times, guys, has drawn throughout amateur radio, and we couldn't be more pleased. We're all dedicated emergency communications students. We do a lot of that in the Los Angeles area, and we believe we've set a trend, especially with Winlink. So we love to share this information, and we do it willingly with you. So you need to know who's piloting the course today. Some introductions. Dave Goldenberg, W0DHG, wave your hand, is Assistant DEC of Aries LAX Northwest Section. He is the SysOp for a Winlink gateway in the San Fernando Valley, one of the first. Dave is active in Boys and Girl Scouts, and just to prove he can increase the ranks, all of his kids are amateur radio licensees. And
in fact, six of the 7 people that live in my home have licenses.
I think that's dedication. I really do. Dan Tomlinson, NR6V, wave your hand, Dan, is a longtime member of Aries LAX and is an officer with the Los Angeles Fire Department Auxiliary Communication Service. Dan's a retired police officer, also a SysOp of a gateway, one of the first in the San Fernando Valley, NR6V10. Chris Mattia, wave your hand, Chris. W6AH is a member of both Aries LAX and Ventura County Aries ACS. Chris has his hands in many online learning platforms, including the one we're using today, WaveTalkers.com. He manages learning and promotional projects worldwide. And when you look at his resume, he has on his resume a little company called Apple. And I'm David Arntz, KK60A, Assistant DEC, Aries LAX Northeast Section, member of LAFD ACS, and soon to be retired from a 45-year plus career in the evil radio and television news business. So I'd rather do this. So welcome, everybody. You have an esteemed panel of instructors and people who are dedicated to teaching all of what we're going to talk about in the next 4 class sessions. So we'll meet today. We'll meet next Sunday, the 21st at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Then we take the following Sunday off, Thanksgiving week, and we're back on December 5th, and we wrap on December 12th. This session, class number 1, is really going to not be on the air yet. We're going to concentrate on just the program itself and what we know is Telnet, because we want to show you the depth of Winlink Express as you can use it with your served agencies. Most of us in Los Angeles County, our served agencies are hospitals. There are more than 70. And we try to assist them with backup emergency communications. So we know across the country, you're not necessarily dealing with hospitals, you're dealing with sheriff's departments, police departments, all sorts of agencies that can use this type of emergency communications. So we want to, in everything that we do in these classes, keep in mind that this is directed toward helping you help your served agency communicate better and faster. So with that, let's get into the meat of what Winlink is and how it works. We say if you can do email, you can do email by amateur radio. So the first thing is to understand what's going on. And Chris, you have an infographic that will begin to explain what's happening with Winlink, unlike your commercial email program. Chris, over to you.
Hey, Chris, before you do that, there's a request in the chat to put the YouTube live stream out there so folks can share that out. I don't know if that's quick and easy. If it's quick and easy, do it. If not, then just carry on.
Yeah, if somebody could just go to YouTube, search for WaveTalkers, and just paste it in the link. Yeah, it shows up right away. Okay, so hello, everyone. I'm Chris Mattia, Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. And what we're going to start off with today, let me switch over to my slides here behind me, and I'll transmogrify myself down into the corner, maybe move my microphone a little bit out of the way.
Cool.
So it's kind of not in the way for us. So we're gonna get started today talking about Winlink, the Winlink email service itself, and what it is, how it works, and so forth. So what I would like to do, I'm going to go ahead and mute if my co-hosts can all mute themselves very quickly. I want to start off talking about something that we're all familiar with, and that is how email works. And this is the traditional style of email that we're all used to using on a daily basis. And we'll start off with, let's say you get a new job at some company and you get your badge the first day, you get your credentials, and usually the very first thing that you get is your email address. And your email address is usually in the format of your name, whoever you are, at your company's email server, whatever that happens to be. I'm going to use an example here called planetyondo.com, but it's really any email service that you've ever used, Gmail or Hotmail or whatever's out there. Okay, so you've got your email credentials now. The next thing that you get started with is your email program. And your email program can be any number of things. It might be your Gmail program that you're logging in through the web. It might be Mail or Outlook or whatever it happens to be. And they all work pretty similar. So we're just going to walk through the common components that we have here. The first is you have a little send and receive email button. You usually click that when you first sign on, and it just goes up and it checks your mail from the server. It brings it back down for you, and it loads it into a place like your inbox where all of your messages are located. You'll oftentimes have a lot of other mailboxes there. You'll have an outbox, a sent mail items, and so forth. You may have some additional folders that you've created. When you go to create a new email, you usually click on that compose email button. It's usually somewhere up in the toolbar. It might be a name, might be an icon, something like that. And there is going to be a to field, a from, and a subject field that's in there for you to be able to see. I see some people are posting in the chat that they'd like me to share the screen. If you can make sure that if you go up to the top right where it says view and make sure you're in the speaker view, that way you can see my screen full screen so that we're able to do everything that we need to. Okay, so you're going to click that share email button or the create email button, and then you're going to fill out the information that's here. And when you do, the first thing that you'll notice is in the from field, that's your actual email address that you would get. So it's going to come from you at your email server. You would then oops, somehow I've jumped backwards in the slides. There we go. Magically will come forward. There we go. Now we've typed in the to field. This is who you're going to send the message to. The person at whatever location. And I know this is really small. It's sarah@stateu.org. Who it is, it's not really important. You're sending an email to some particular person. You would then give it a subject. In this case, maybe sales report. And then you would give it a message. Sales are up 15%. Yay, that's amazing. Okay, great. So you send the message by clicking the send button, and it goes over to your outbox. And this is where your email program just kind of like takes off on its own. It will then automatically take that message and it's going to send it over via the internet to your company's email server. In this case, it's looking for @planetyondo.com, which is the mail server. It's going to take that mail server is then going to route the traffic up onto the internet. It's going to route that email automatically up, and it's going to look for that remote server, that @stateu.org, or whoever it is that you're trying to send that message to. Once the message arrives inside of that remote email server, it's going to then deliver it to the user, in this case, Sarah@stateu.org. Once her machine gets that email, a little tiny message is going to be sent all the way back through the chain to let you know that the message was received. And this is the general path that we all send email through every single day with every message that you send. So how does, oops, and now we got to watch that little animation. I got to remember to click the right button. It always helps when you click the correct button on your keyboard to keep advancing the slides. Instead
It's good though.
It's good. It's good. There we go. There we go. We just a quick little review of the email. Okay, so how does Winlink work? That's what we're all here to talk about. And what the heck is Winlink? Well, Winlink is basically, in a nutshell, it's email, but for your amateur radio account. So in this case, your credentials are not your company's credentials. Your credentials actually come directly from your FCC ham radio license. So in my case, my call sign is W6AH. So that's my credentials that I have. And that is how the Winlink system knows me and all of the mail that's going in and out of my account. Now, if you went on to wavetalkers.com and you went to the Winlink page and you followed the instructions, you should have been able to get your Winlink account, get the Winlink application downloaded, installed, and then get your account created. And when you did that, you had to enter in your call sign as your credentials, and that's all set up. You also, at the same time, you had to enter in a real world email address. In this case, let's say I'm chris@planetyondo.com. It's not a real email address, but let's say it is. But that would be your actual email address, that if there's any communication that needs to happen between the Winlink service and you, like say you lose your password, you got to reset it, they're going to send it back to this address that you've set up. But all of your mail is going to come through your amateur radio call sign address. So we got our credentials set up now. The next thing is you need your application in order to send and receive all of these messages. And in the world of Winlink, the application's name is something called RMS Express, or Radio Message Service Express. And I know this is very confusing because we keep talking about getting your Winlink email account and you're using Winlink, but the name of the application is actually called RMS Express. So when you go to winlink.org and you go to the download link, you're downloading the RMS Express application. You're then going to install that. You get it installed just like you would any other application. And it's a good idea to just go ahead and create a dedicated folder for that. We have that in the instructions. You install the application inside of there. Now, there's a couple of things inside of RMS Express that should be pretty familiar to you already. There's a compose button. We're going to come back to the compose button in just a minute. But there's also things that you're familiar with, like an inbox, an outbox, the sent mail messages. All of that works pretty similar to what you've already experienced in your regular email. But there are a couple of other features, one of which is something called Forms. And Forms is incredibly helpful, especially for emergency communicators that are partnered with shared agencies, because Winlink has embedded inside of it a ton of different forms that are ready to go that your shared agency would be expecting to be able to fill out, or common traffic that you may need to send. We're going to come back to Forms in just a little while. In fact, Dave W0DHG is going to do a little demonstration of Forms here in just a little while. So let's look at the next thing that's a little different. The next one is post to outbox. Now, in your regular email program, you would compose that email and you hit the send button and it sends your message over to your outbox. Well, inside of Winlink, what you do is you click this button that says post to outbox, and then it physically moves the mail message that you just wrote. It puts it in your outbox and it just waits. It just parks it there. It doesn't go anywhere quite yet. It waits for the next action from you. And that next action is to use this open session button. Now, this inside of Winlink, the open session button does a whole bunch of different things. First of all, it's how you choose to both transmit and receive your mail through the Winlink application. You can use both internet service, or you can use RF or radio in order to send that message. And every single message has that ability. Now, the brilliant thing about this is if you have access to the internet, great. Use the internet, send the messages fast. If you are without access to the internet, you can use RF. And that's where a lot of the magic, most of the time that we're going to spend in the rest of this class is going to be focused on. But today we'll look a lot more at the internet. There's also multiple protocols, and we're going to look at that in just a second without getting too much into some of the gobbledygook inside of there. So we've got that open session button. So let's compose a message. You do that by simply clicking the compose message button. And obviously this is a simplified graphical look at this. So we'll step through the real application in just a minute. So you compose a message, and right away you notice something pretty interesting. The from field is no longer your real world email address. The from field actually says your amateur radio call sign. In my case, it's W6AH, that is automatically entered into the from field for you. Next is the to field. And the to field is another place where the world of Winlink and the world of normal email diverge. You can, of course, enter in a regular real world email address, and you can send that email to any real world email account. You can also enter in simply a call sign. Now, why is this such a powerful thing? Well, let's say you get, there's an emergency in your area, communications are all down, you deploy out to a local shelter, and you have a bunch of people at the shelter, and you need to be able to send wellness messages that say, hey, so-and-so is here at the shelter, and they're trying to communicate with their friends and family out of the disaster area to let them know that they're okay. You can send emails through Winlink to a real world email address. So that is a huge thing that you're able to do. You also do not need to know somebody's actual email address if they're an amateur radio operator using Winlink. So for instance, you can use a call sign. So if I wanted to send a message to David, I could simply type in his call sign, KK6DA, hit send, boom, the message goes directly to him. The subject and the message section, these work pretty much exactly the way that a regular email would work. You just enter in a subject, whatever it happens to be, you put in a message, and now, once again, we diverge. So instead of clicking the send button that you have in your regular email, what you're going to do is you're going to click post to outbox. And when you do that, it's going to take that message, once again, it's going to move it into the outbox, and it's just going to park that message there. It's going to wait for you to have some more interactions. Then you need to click the open session button. So you can start to see Winlink email is much more of a manual process because it gives you lots of points along the way of sending this message to decide what is the best way for your particular circumstance right now to send this message. So when you click open session, what happens is a little pop-up menu appears, and there's a lot of choices in here, and this can be very confusing. When the first time I looked at this, I was like, what do I select? How do I understand what this whole menu thing here is? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. See, all of the areas here are all grouped together into 4 major areas. The top section are all of your RMS gateways. Remember, these are your radio message service gateways. This is essentially the core of what Winlink is. And we're gonna walk through an example of how this works in just a minute. There's different protocols that are listed in there. I've got 2 of them listed. There's a lot more. I've got Telnet Winlink and Packet Winlink, but there's a bunch more that are in there. The whole bottom section, there's 3 more tiers here. Those are other ways that you can use Winlink to send your messages. It may be peer-to-peer, where you're just taking 2 Winlink stations and you're connecting to each other directly. And that can be done either via the internet or via RF. There's radio only, where it's just going back and forth. And there's also a Telnet post office. For right now, we're just going to group all of that stuff into the other category, and we'll set it aside until later in the course. But this is still pretty confusing. How do we figure out which thing to select? Well, if you look in the list of all of the things that show up here, and it says Telnet, if there's a listing that says Telnet, that means it's using the internet. If you have an option that does not say Telnet, then it's using the radio or it's using RF. And so you just get to choose which way you want to send your message out. So that's what happens there. We're going to keep things simple today. We're going to use Telnet. And you may wonder, like, hey, this is all about radio, amateur radio, and we really want to use RF. Well, if you have access to the internet is much faster to send that message. So use the internet, use whatever means of communication that you have at your disposal, and have the flexibility to adapt as need be. So we're going to choose Telnet Winlink as our session type that we're going to choose here. And then we go ahead and it's going to close that pop-up and it's going to open a whole other window. And this window is going to be called the session window. And every single type of session, all of those different protocols, they will open different windows depending on which one that you've chosen. But they all basically have a couple of components here. And the one that you mostly need to pay attention to is the settings. Now, if you're using any of the Telnet options, there's nothing to do inside of settings because it's all kind of pre-configured. It pretty much works. It sends the message via your computer's already established internet connection. However, if you're using RF, that's where a lot of the hangups can be, where you have to configure how you want Winlink to talk to your particular radio. And we're going to cover that throughout the rest of this course. We're going to spend a lot of time doing that portion and make sure everybody's able to do that. Next is the start button. And this is basically the go button. It's like, okay, this is finally my send and receive button. I can send this message out to somebody. So you click the start button and what happens? Well, this is where things get really interesting. When you click start inside of your session window, if you're using one of the internet or one of the Telnet protocols, then Winlink or RMS Express, the application you're using, is going to use your computer's internet connection. It's going to connect to the internet, and it's going to send out those messages that you've created, all that traffic, and it's going to send it to some RMS gateway that is also connected on the internet. Now, remember, the RMS gateway, these are essentially email servers, but within the Winlink world, if you will. And many of them are connected physically to the internet so that traffic can be easily sent through them. Notice that all of the arrows I've got drawn here are bidirectional, because when you click start, not only does all of your messages get sent out of your Winlink account and get sent out to whoever you're trying to address them to, but it will also then receive messages at the same time. So it's this immediate back and forth exchange that takes place. So that gets your email off to one of the RMS gateways, but how does it know how to get to the place where you're trying to go? Well, other users may be connected to other RMS gateways that are established around the world, and they can all just talk through the internet. It's a bidirectional communication. If the internet is available, they will happily use that pathway to send their messages back and forth. However, there are times when there is no access to the internet, in which case RF comes into play, and RMS gateways can connect to each other directly via RF. Now, this may be through VHF, UHF, HF. It could be a variety of different protocols. It may be VAR or VAR FM or VAR HF. There's a bunch of them out there that could be used, but they can send messages to each other and pass that traffic, even if there is no connection to the internet. And eventually it will find some message, some gateway that is either connected to the internet and upload its messages through the gateway or through the internet, or it'll just continue using RF as it needs to. So that's one way that you're able to send your messages. It may be that just that last mile is hopping via RF, but it may be a lot of it is traversing via the internet. So what's the other way to send messages? Well, the other way is via RF directly from your computer using your own radio. Now, you're going to connect to your radio via some kind of cable. Usually it's going to be USB, it could be a serial connection cable, it could be a variety of different things. You might use a TNC such as or you might use a tool such as the name went right out of my head.
Signal link.
Thank you, a signal link. See, this is my aim at this. It may be that you've got a
Okay.
signal link connecting between your radio and your computer. And so that all the message goes there, and then your radio sends via RF out to one of the RMS gateways. And then that just connects into the overall network. This allows for an incredible amount of redundancy and allows you to get your message to where it needs to go via essentially any means that you need. So this is the basic setup of what we're going to be doing. And what I would like to do now is I would like to give you a little demo of how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my PC here. Let me change mice here on the desktop. And this is what, oops, let me change it so I can actually see my computer over here. This is what Winlink Express or RMS Express. So if you look on the start menu, you can see RMS Express. It's got this purple and gray checkerboard icon that gets installed. And so the application is actually called RMS Express. However, once you launch the application, it calls it Winlink Express up here in the upper left corner. Now, is that confusing? Yep. Did we write it? Nope. The folks who wrote it, those guys are amazing. And they do some absolutely incredible work. So we've got our Winlink Express application. Let's take a little tour of a couple of things you see here. First of all, you'll notice I've got my call sign up here in the upper left-hand corner. There's a bunch of different options here along the top. Over here on the left-hand side, there's a little new message button. This is that compose a message button. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And it opens up what is pretty familiar to us. It looks like an email message. I mean, there's nothing really fancy here. I mentioned earlier that here in the to field, you can either put a real world email address, and it is a good idea to send yourself a email through Winlink the first time that you sign on to here. That way, your commercial email account gets highlighted so that it'll allow traffic to pass directly in, because Winlink will tend to reject messages from the outside if you haven't communicated with them. So it's a good idea to go ahead and send a message to yourself, to your real world email address. But you can also send one to somebody's call sign. So in this case, I'm going to send one to my colleagues here. I'm going to send it to switch back over to the right keyboard here, W0DHG. I'm just going to type in his address. I'm going to hit the tab key, and look at that. It auto capitalizes that email address and puts the semicolon in there. Now, if I want to add a couple of other folks on here, I'll also send it to NR6V. That would be Dan. And I will also send it to David, KK6DA. And there we go. So we can use the to field, the CC field, just like you're used to. I'm going to say hello world as my first message, and I'm going to say hello from the class, and I'm going to sign it with my call sign W6AH. You can put anything that you need to in the message. We would suggest not sending attachments, although you can send attachments, but remember, a lot of this is going to go via RF. And so bandwidth is really limited. Winlink kind of came about a lot for those of us who do offshore passages on boats. And it was a way to send communications while you're at sea. And those communications were really allowing for very nice separation. Questions coming into the chat is, what is the separation between the addresses? You can use commas and just do comma separated, comma space, and that will allow you to have multiple addresses. It actually inserts a semicolon in there is what it's really inserting. Okay,
so Chris, if I have a 4 megabyte picture I want to send, can I do that this way?
You can do it this way, but it's not suggested. It is totally not suggested, because what's going to happen is when that large attachment file is being pulled down from the remote side, that file is going to have to come over via RF for the most part. I mean, yeah, there are times when the internet is going to be there, but you don't want to plan on that. So having large files is just not a good idea. For instance, we did a recent exercise, and I was using Vara HF, which is a pretty fast protocol. We'll talk about it later in the class. And I was getting a whopping 1.5 kilobits per second. That was a really fast connection. So scale back the expectations. This is not the current email system that you're used to. Remember, we're sending just what is necessary in our communication. So
if I have a 20 kilobyte Excel sheet, just a 20 kilobyte, would that be acceptable?
So the RF limit is 120K when you're sending RF that they'll block you from. So ideally you want to set it under that, and we'll get into some of the later classes on how to resize images and other files to make them the most efficient.
Excellent. So let's see. Now I've got my message. It's all composed. It's ready to go. So what are we going to do next? Next, we're going to come up here and we're going to, instead of sending the message, there's a lot of tools up there that's available to you, but instead of sending the message, we're going to post it to the outbox. And there's a link right here at the top that says post to outbox. And I go ahead and do that. And nothing happened. But something did happen over here in the left-hand side. In my system folders, you can see there's my outbox, and it now has a 1 next to it. If I click on it, there is that message that's about to be sent out, but it hasn't gone anywhere yet. It's still queued up in my outbox. In a little while, we're going to do a demonstration that'll show you why this is a really good idea if you're using Winlink as part of an emergency communications net. So you can pass traffic in order. All right, so I've got it in my outbox. Next, I'm going to come up here and find that open session button. Here's the little drop down next to it, and notice there are all of these different options: Telnet Winlink, Packet Winlink, Pactor, Vara HF, Vara FM, Iridium Go. Yeah, you can even send Winlink messages via satellite phones using the Iridium network. How cool is that? The next section under there is peer-to-peer options. There's a bunch of different, a lot of these are repeated, but in the peer-to-peer section, here's our RF only, our radio only, and then our Telnet post office. But we're going to come all the way back up here to the top, and we're going to select Telnet Winlink right there at the top. I'll go ahead and select that, and then I will click that open session button. It's right here. I click open session, and there's that special little window that comes up. Remember, there's the settings button. If we had any settings to set, there's nothing to set. When you do Telnet, it's ready to go out of the box. It's all ready. And then the start. So I'm going to click the start button here in 3, 2, 1, click. And if the demo gods are with me, we see the handshake that's actually happening. That message just disappeared out of my outbox, and the message went out. You'll notice if you look at the text that's in here, you'll notice, I mean, there's lots of text and stuff that's all in there, but one of the things that's kind of interesting is right here. Notice you can see WL2K, that's the gateway that I happen to be connecting to. DE, remember, just like regular, like in CW or other different formats, DE from W6AH, and then it's got my grid square, and that you entered in your grid square during your setup. The rest of this is all the handshake that's going on. So yes, in fact, at the end of your transmission, you do hand off your amateur radio call sign, so you were in compliance with the FCC rules. All right, so I got my message, and hopefully by this point, my esteemed colleagues have responded with some kind of hello at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and just click start again. And this is the same as like saying send and receive. And if the demo gods are with me, when it comes back in, I'm going to click back over into my inbox. Hopefully. Oops, it looks like I do not have any messages yet. Maybe my esteemed colleagues will respond. I'll click start again. This is going to go.
We're just slow.
We're slow. Come on, guys. We're live on the internet. We're doing these demo things. Hey, Dave, did you get the email? Did it come into your message?
Yeah, I did, but I'm not sending because I have some demos to go out when I do my demonstration.
Okay.
So I was hoping that Dan or David would send them out.
You send it? Okay, let me do one more time.
Another thing to point out on the screen there, as you see, there's a message ID at the top of the message that Chris is showing in his inbox. Each message that goes out will be identified with a specific message identifier, and it allows you to track it. Look, there's some messages coming.
There we
out. I'll throw them
go.
back to Chris there, but is a message. There's a tracking for each individual email, and we'll show you a little later on how you can actually go to the Winlink website and track those messages and see who they came from, where they went to, and so on and so forth.
And Chris, you've got one from me now.
Oh, very nice. Look, I just got the one in from Dan. I will hit start again, and that should bring in the other message. There we go, from KK6DA. So Dan sent me the message back right here, and let's just have a look at it. It's got the message ID right here at the top, the date. It's coming in from NR6V to W6AH. The source is NR6V. Download from, and he just wrote in received. Notice the contents, the traffic that we're passing back and forth, very minimal, very small to be able to do that. So that is the kind of nuts and bolts of just sending and receiving an email. And again, in this case, we just used Telnet because it was an easy way to kind of get up and started. We're going to do some more with RF as the class progresses. But at this point, what I would like to do is transmogrify myself back up. I'll switch back over into my booth, and I would like to bring my esteemed colleague, Dave, W0DHG, to stage and have him talk a little bit about, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about templates, I believe, right? You're on mute still. There you go.
I'm gonna talk about some of the templates and forms that are there for your use. And there's been some good questions in the chat. I was just answering one of the questions there. We'll show you how to change grid squares and a whole bunch of other things. But for now, let's jump into my Windows machine here. And I'll share my screen. Let me know if you can see me okay.
Yes.
All right, great. So we've kind of gone over the interface, and we'll go into a little bit more of that as we go forward. One of the benefits, one of the powers, one of the things that we're hoping that you'll all see as we go forward with the class is that there are a number of, and we're getting close to 100 or over 100 different standardized forms that are available to you as an emergency communications operator built into the Winlink system. And if the form that you need isn't there, there's the ability for you to create your own form, or if it's useful enough, to create it and submit it and have it come along with the package so that they're available to you. And in the same manner as Chris just showed you, if I want to send a new message, I'm going to select message, logged into and a new message, or you can click the new message button. And I could just start my email from here. I've got an important message to get through. The EOC manager wants to get a message to a location and they want to send some information. That's great. I could just type it in here. But on the other hand, I could look at different templates. There are a number of templates that are built in and standardized. As you can see here, there are American Red Cross forms available. There are, state of California, Canadian, FEMA forms. There are a bunch of general forms that we're going to look at in a minute. There are the standard HICS if you're working with hospitals, or ICS forms that are available. And they're all in here. They're ready to go. They're very full-functioned forms that will allow you to quickly fill out something and generate on the other side where you send your message to a very professional looking complete form that you can hand to someone who's not a ham that's expecting information to go from one place to the other, such that they can respond. You can bring it back to your station and then send it back so that people understand. So I'm going to start with is just showing you a general form, a general Winlink check-in form. And again, I'm going to back out of here and show you that we'd go, hey, I'm going to send a new message. I'm at a location and I want to check in. I'm going to go to my standard templates, and under the general forms, I'm going to select a Winlink check-in. You double click on that and it will load up this form. And as you can see, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of detail here. Date and time, I click into the field and it'll automatically grab my system time. So I don't need to look at my watch or know anything other than my PC's up to date. So I'll fill that in. We're going to call today an exercise. We can tell whoever's receiving this how we're sending it, which systems that are available. For today, I'm going to send this Telnet, so I'm going to select Telnet, but there are a bunch of other options here. I'm going to send this to my tactical call right now, and we'll actually talk about that. Actually, I'm going to change this. We're going to send this to KK6DA because he's running net control right now, and I'm locally out in the field at a location. We can check in with initial call signs of the operators at site, and as we mentioned earlier, I live in a house with 6 other hams, so I'm going to check all of us in at one time. And I'm the sender, my call sign here. Location, so I can mark a location here. I'm in Woodland Hills, California, and the system has the ability to grab a GPS coordinate or an MGRS coordinate or a grid ground. I can type those in automatically. I have them entered in my system. In fact, I have a GPS dongle that automatically populates these numbers, and again, we'll talk about how to do that in a later session, but just know there's a lot of information. There's a lot of detail here. I could say Woodland Hills, California, which is a big location, or I can give you down to my decimal GPS coordinates, which literally will show you in the corner of my house where I'm sitting in my shack right now, sending you the information. And I could type a basic message here like, we're hungry.
Send pizza.
Please, please send pizza. Okay. You can send a lot of information here. Can somebody let the waiting room folks in here? I'll admit them. You can send a lot of information here. For this basic check-in form, I could send a maximum of 250 characters. So a little bit more than an original Twitter feed. I can send information about, hey, neighborhood safe, or we have multiple fires, or we need medical aid, or any number of different information, different messages that we could send, canned or otherwise. When I'm done filling out, again, this very basic quick check-in form, I'll select submit. Winlink's going to let me know, hey, you're ready to do this. If you're really ready, say okay. And it's going to post you out to a local host. You close the browser window because you filled this all out in a web browser. And here's my message that I started a minute ago. It automatically populated KK6DA. I'm going to add W6AH to this. And I'm also going to add this to NR6V, my other awesome instructor. It's got the basic information, the subject. There's this XML viewer that shows the form that we're going to send this in. And the details of what's in my message. When I'm good to go and I'm ready to go, again, as Chris showed you, we're going to post this to our outbox. And as you'll see, now I don't have only one message in my outbox, but I have 2. They're ready to go. I did my express check-in, and if I were ready to send this, I'd go ahead and open my Telnet session and send and receive the message. But before we do that, I want to show you one more form. And again, there are any number of forms in the system. We have a bunch of custom forms in Los Angeles and all across the nation. But what we're trying to do is show you the value, the why you might want to do this. I'm going to open up another new message. And remember, as I've pointed out here, I have 2 messages waiting in my outbox, right? I have 2 messages that are ready to go and send. If I were sending this via Telnet, they'd go pretty quickly, again, because I'm connected to the internet. But if I was sending this over RF, it would take a little bit longer because we're only going to send a certain number of kilobits per second. But I can stage a whole bunch of messages and send them in one transaction. I send the message to a gateway. The gateway sends me an acknowledgement, and we go back and forth. And again, we'll talk about this in a future meeting in a little bit more detail and show you how to do this. In fact, we're even going to help you get set up and connected. For this one, I'm going to go into a slightly different form. I'm going to go into the general forms. Wait, no, remind me where the sitreps are. Sitreps are in the
shares.
Right, the shares. So I'm going to look at the shares form, and there's a spot rep form. Spot reps are a very useful form. I'm going to select the spot reps form, and again, opens my browser and gives me a little bit more of a targeted, detailed information. There's a precedence here. What's the level of precedence? It's a flash, immediate, priority, or routine. If you're used to working with shares, you'll understand what those levels, those priorities are, but I'm going to call this routine. It's automatically populated the date and the time for me. A task number is whatever I want it to be, right? Depending on what your task is, where you are, you might decide, hey, I'm at a location. We're going to call it this location and number 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. It's automatically knowing that I'm logged in, so it's going to send it to me. Again, I'm going to send this to one of my partners in crime, KK60A. The info here is all is well, still hungry. Where is the pizza? Okay. And obviously we could have more serious messages here, but for demonstration purposes today, that's what I'm interested in. They want to know the state and location I'm in. It automatically populates Los Angeles County. Now I have a GPS device in here, so it automatically figures out where I am. And for the spot report, especially in a disaster, a hurricane, an earthquake, a flood, a tsunami, or whatever, here's information about where I am on the ground right now so that I can send a message to my EOC. Landlines are functioning. Cell phones are functioning. AM/FM broadcast station, I don't know because I'm not listening to the radio right now. I didn't turn the TV on, so I'm going to say unknown. The water's working. Yeah, I heard the toilet flush down the hall a little bit while ago. The power's still on. Yes. The internet seems to be working. And again, any other info I can add here. Who's the point of contact? Well, I am. I sent this message. And I can put in my information here, including, hey, if everything's working, I'll send you my cell phone number. I'm not shy about that. It's on the internet anyways. When I'm done with this, again, I'll say I'm going to submit my form. It reminds me, hey, if I'm ready to do this, I'm going to do this. And now I have my fully functioned, not sure where that came from, my fully functioned note here, ready to go. All of the lines of data only. It's not sending the entire form. It's just sending the metadata. And I will post this to my outbox as well. Well, now I have 3 messages in my outbox. Now, if I decide at this point, hey, I'm ready to go. Hey, the internet's up, or hey, I've got an open window on the RF. There's nobody sending packet or VAR or other traffic over the internet. I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I want to send this. I want to get this out as soon as possible because, hey, I want my pizza. Okay. So I would go here and for now, we're going to show you Telnet Winlink. I'm going to open my session. I get a pop-up window. And again, there are some basic settings for Telnet, but don't worry about that. It's all fine. I'm going to say, hey, start my session. And what you'll see run through here is I sent 1 message. I sent 2 messages. I sent 3 messages. And I got a message received. And I disconnected. And once it's done disconnecting, that basically means I got my messages out. If you look at my outbox, it's empty. If you look at my inbox, I got some messages in. This was from earlier today, a different test. And I got the W6AH message from previous. That's all there really is to sending and receiving the messages. Again, a lot of the power of what Winlink is, and I saw some messages earlier on in the chat where, this is just email and what's the benefit, and if it's just Telnet, you're on the internet. Right now, we're just talking about Telnet and internet because the next level of complexity after you get set up and you get signed up and you can send messages is getting connected RF, whether it's a UHF, VHF, or an HF connection, and that will require an interface, a radio, an antenna, and we'll talk about that in future sessions, and we'll actually help you decide which parts and pieces and whatever and how to get them connected and walk through the process. So again, this is like crawl, walk, run. We're still crawling here. We're using the internet to send these messages because that's what we can do in this particular format.
David, we've gotten a couple of questions that have come in through the chat at this point. One of them, Mike KK6OKU, is asking, are forms available offline? And are they small enough to be able to send via RF?
Yeah, so the forms are available offline. In fact, you can do an update of the form package via RF, again, given you have a good enough connection. not only that, you can actually take, let's see, I'm sharing my screen, but you can actually take a lot of these forms and put them on a flash drive. They're HTML forms. Anybody can fill them out on any computer anywhere. And you can actually give one of these forms to one of your served agencies, one of the people who's not a ham at your location, and say, hey, when you want to update this information and send it to somebody, take this form, fill it out on the flash drive, save it, give it to me, and I'll put it out over the air. They're very small forms. They're very compact. And again, you're not actually sending the entire form, and even the forms aren't very big. You're just sending the metadata with some technical details that tie it back to a specific form. So it says, hey, I'm sending this. It's a spot rep. All you need to do is look in your spot rep catalog, fill in the blanks, and then you get the form. And I think the benefit of this is it's fast, it's quick, there's a lot of detail, and you can provide really specific information. I'll show you a really quick form here before we get into the next part to help kind of illustrate one of the things that this really made it clear to me. And in Los Angeles, again, we support hospitals. And in a hospital, the hospital request, we have what's called a hospital resource request. And if one of our hospitals, if there's an earthquake here in Los Angeles and one of the hospitals needs medication, equipment, personnel, or any of these things, they can give me a spreadsheet and I can type in any number of requested items. And, you know, they give me a spreadsheet of 20 different medications. The difference between dicloxacillin and doxycycline is a couple of letters in the spelling, but in terms of the therapeutical treatment is huge. And if we get it wrong when we're calling out over the air, it could be critical to a patient, in addition to the fact that spelling out a medication that's 12 or 13 letters long, I spelled dicloxacillin, Delta, India, Lima, Oscar. I can type this in here and send an entire message in seconds as opposed to having to read it out over the air. And that's a lot of the benefit of utilizing some of these forms and the capability of what's in Winlink.
Somebody had a question in here. Do I need to buy a signal link? I have a handheld only, no other antenna except for the one that came with it. That's a good question about. We're gonna dive into the how you connect your radio specifically in later sessions. In general, though, you generally do need some kind of interface for every radio. Some radios do have things like Bluetooth and they can do it wirelessly, but for the most part, you are going to need some kind of device that goes in between in order to make that connection.
Right. And if you think you're always going to be at a location that's always going to have some kind of internet connectivity and you know, keep your fingers crossed that would be the case, sure, you might be able to do this without, but the reality is we're planning for that, you know, gray sky day where the internet's down and the power may be out and there's limited connections to things. So we want to be able to, you know, hit a gateway. For my location, I can get into a gateway in Simi Valley or even Tijuana through a couple of hops. If the internet and the power and all those other things are down in the general Los Angeles area, I can hit gateways that are up to 200 miles away and get it out on the internet and get it to the outside area such that someone can get my message and know, hey, we need support and we need this specific support or these specific items.
So, Dave, if we have no internet to get a message across town, we could send it 200 miles away, and in theory, it would make its way on the internet back to a location nearby.
Yeah, the idea is, and the nice thing about the network of the RMS, the radio message server gateways, is they're all across the country, all across the world, in fact. And if my local area is out, I just need to be able to either hop out of using other gateways in my area that may not have internet up, but have the ability to talk to other gateways, or to allow me to bounce through other gateways, or I go outside of my area using HF. In recent shakeout drill, Chris, W6AH, and I both connected from Los Angeles to Texas directly point-to-point sent information without any other connection other than the RF frequency on HF. And we're able to get those stations to send that message out via the internet from where they are, assuming that, our area is out of internet connection, but theirs still has it, and then can route that to someone that can get us help or support.
Cool.
Anything else, or should we move on to the little net control demo?
Happy to go forward.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So
I was going to bring David, KK60A, who's going to be playing the role of our net control operator. I'm going to spotlight each of us back up on screen so that we can do a little live demonstration here for you.
So, Chris, are we doing a faux RF net, or are we doing just a Winlink net?
I think we're just going to do a Winlink check-in. Just go ahead and do a regular check-in here. We'll start with as if we're playing radio here,
right?
And we'll do our check-ins, and then we'll pass our digital traffic.
So this is the way we would use a combined voice and digital network. Net control actually becomes the traffic cop. So we're going to call our net. This is KK6DA opening our net this afternoon. We're looking for voice check-ins first. We'll make a list, and then we'll do digital check-ins. Who would like to check in first?
Whiskey 0 Delta Hotel Golf.
W0 DHG. Next station.
November Romeo 6 Victor.
Dan, good afternoon. NR6B. Next station.
Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel.
Okay. Net control acknowledges W0 DHG, NR6V, and W6AH. Gentlemen, prepare your traffic, and we'll call you one by one to send your digital traffic. Let's go in order. W0 DHG, feel free to send your traffic.
All right, ready to send traffic. Traffic's being sent.
And we acknowledge receipt of one message. Thank you, W0DHG. Let's go to the next station. Dan, NR6V. Please send your digital traffic.
NR6V, stand by. Go to the next operator. I'm not ready.
Very good. Let's go to W6AH. Chris, if you're ready, please feel free to send your digital traffic.
Thank you. W6AH standing by to posting to Outbox and sending my digital traffic. This digital traffic is going to be coming via Telnet. Traffic sent.
Thank you. We'll check receive in just a moment. Thank you, W6AH. And back to NR6V if you're ready, Dan.
NR6V, I am still not ready. One of the nice things about forms is that if you don't fill them out correctly, it will tell you.
It nags you.
It nags you. And I'm having a problem doing what it wants me to do.
Okay. Take your time.
Net control, I am ready to send my traffic.
NR6V, feel free with your digital traffic.
NR6V, one message sent.
Excellent. Thank you. Chris, at this point, shall we go to my Winlink and see how it's received?
Yes, please.
Okay.
WAH.
Let's do that. Stand by with me just a moment. Okay, can you see my Winlink?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Let's open a session. Here, by the way, are David's two messages earlier. Please send pizza. There's a Winlink session. Start. 3 messages. 3 messages received, and we're disconnected. By the way, each message, you should know, has an individual name. This is the name of number 1, number 2, number 3. if you need to refer to that ever. So here are the messages. These are Winlink Express check-ins. This is what it looks like on my end. Now, once again, just to underscore, this is the information that was sent. It's basically text. It's metadata. We're not sending the HTML form, but it reconstitutes itself as the form. So it plugs all of that metadata into these fields, and we all know it's a Winlink Express check-in.
And the beauty of that is that your served agency is going to get that data in a form that's very similar to what they work with every day. So in the stress of a disaster, they're not trying to figure out what the heck is this you handed me. It's what they know. And that's very, very valuable in a disaster.
Right. That resource request form that I demonstrated a couple of minutes ago that I showed you for the LA County where they need medication, personnel, or equipment is exactly a copy of the form, the paper form that they would fill out and put on a fax machine if they had phone communications. And again, we're like the 4th level or 5th level of disaster communications, but we send that same message when you print it out on a printer or show them on a screen. It's exactly what they're used to seeing. And it's easy to recreate those forms based on that if you have some basic HTML skills.
And I am sending 3 ACKs, 3 acknowledgments back to these 3 stations. Now, in an RF net, it would sound and operate much differently, but we would take it in order as we just demonstrated. And that's the way we run digital networks, a combination of voice and data at the same time on the same frequency. And it works out very well.
Yeah, and if you're in an area with just a few operators, you may be able to just have the individual discipline of listening for a clear frequency and sending traffic without coordination. But in Los Angeles, as mentioned earlier, we have 70 plus hospitals that we're dealing with. And for everybody to try to send their traffic without some kind of a coordination would be another disaster.
So just looking at some of the stuff in the chat room, there's been a bunch of questions about other operating system. Winlink is obviously it's Windows based, and a little bit of just background around it. This tool has been around for years and years and years, and actually started off in the boating world where small ships and large ships that were going across great bodies of water. They originally created this so that I could reach out and say, hey, I need help, or I need a weather report. And a lot of that functionality is still in the tool itself. But it's grown to adapt to the amateur radio world and other worlds as well. Yes, it's what we're showing you is Windows only. There are a number of options. There's a program called PAT that will work on Linux, or PAT Link. On my Linux box. In fact, I'm coming to you from a Mac myself and running VirtualBox, which is cross-platform virtual emulator, allow me to run Windows on Mac or Linux or other platforms as well.
And I'm using Parallels.
Right, and David's using Parallels. There's a whole bunch of Boot Camp. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you could run this if you're not, quote unquote, Windows friendly. In addition to the other tools, mostly for the purposes of our class, we are going to focus on the Windows platform, because for the most part, our served agencies, the folks that we work with, both in the hospital, fire departments, police departments in Los Angeles County and otherwise, they're mostly standardized on Windows as well. And it gives them a common platform. I can actually go in to any PC that someone puts in front of me and gives me the ability to install basic software. And in 5 minutes or less, I could have Winlink Express downloaded from the internet, put my username and my password on it and be able to pull Telnet traffic without a radio. Given access to a radio, I can add the RF capabilities in just a couple of minutes more and be sending traffic, out via RF as well. Will help you to a limited amount on the other platforms, but mostly for our purposes, we're really looking at the Windows platform.
I think the point is here from an emergency communication standpoint is you use the tools that are going to be fastest and most effective. And if you can use the internet, if you got internet and you're not stuck in the field with no power, et cetera, then by all means use internet. As we're all taught in emergency communications courses, if you need to use a fax machine, use a fax machine. If you need to walk the message from your location to another seat down the hall, that's the way you do it. So this is one of the methods that you should have in your toolbox. And we think that to know this is really important. You may find yourself in a situation, if you learn nothing more than what we've shown you today, you could be of great assistance to a served agency, to a sheriff's, to a police force, to a hospital, to any kind of municipal place that is FEMA formatted and uses ICS forms or communication forms like ICS 213, which we should all know as emergency communicators. Winlink makes it faster. We have annually, we won't do it this year because of the pandemic, we have annually a statewide medical exercise in California. When was the last time, David, we did it? 2019?
Yeah, 2019.
And it was awful because we wish we had enough personnel to put in 70 hospitals, but this was entirely analog. And can you imagine going through a resource request list from one hospital, OxyContin, iSpell, Oscar, X-ray, Yankee, on and on and on and on. It was backed up within 45 minutes for at least 2 hours. And that's, just not acceptable in this day and age. With Winlink, you could send that entire form in a matter of seconds. So that's a huge, powerful example. Chris, shall we open it up to some other questions or comments?
I wanted to comment. There's several questions on there about radio interfaces, and we'll get into that more in the upcoming sessions. We're going to concentrate on the signal link primarily because it's more or less plug and play, and there is support for virtually all the radios out there. Nobody else really offers that flexibility. But there are lots of interfaces out there. A lot of the less expensive ones, somebody mentioned an inexpensive USB dongle. They work well to some extent, but the biggest problem is push to talk. How do you key the radio to transmit? And most of those don't do that unless you want to get in and start soldering wires to the board. And we're trying to make this as or as plug and play as possible. So we'll get more into that, but there are many, many ways. I just discovered a new device called a DigiRig, and I'm playing with that. So is David G. That holds some promise. It's less expensive than the signal link, but we're concentrating on the signal link because it's very flexible and more or less plug and play.
Yeah, it's like plug it in and mostly just works right off the bat.
I would also add one of the other use cases that, as David was running through how Winlink is really helpful. Let's say many people on your team and many of the hospitals are connected still via the internet, but you have some that are isolated out in a remote location, and that particular hospital or that particular location does not have internet access available. That location can use RF in order to communicate with all of the other members of the team. And it may just be a little bit slower for one using the RF link, but it provides that flexibility. If you start off using internet service and then suddenly your internet goes down, being able to just flip a switch and go over to RF is really super powerful. Question came in. What is that that device called, Dan? The DigiRig?
Yeah, DIGIRIG, and the website is digirig.net. The guy's very responsive. There are a couple different versions, about the size of my thumb. There we go. David's got his there. We've got quite a bit of hope for it, but literally we've just had it a week to play with, so we won't be going into detail on it, but it has promise.
And it is, we should also note that not every single radio needs a separate device. For instance, many of the ICOM radios, the new ICOM 705, the 7300, the 9700, all of those can connect directly via USB directly to your computer, and you don't need an interface for those. Other radios, the Kenwood D74 HT, for instance, can use Bluetooth and can wirelessly connect and use its internal TNC for that. The Kenwood D710G has a separate cable that you can just direct connect in order to do packet. So there are a lot of options out there. I did see a question go through earlier about, hey, I got a low-cost sound card. How do I hook that up to my radio? Just because you have a sound card doesn't necessarily mean that you can connect it into your radio. You may be able to, but as Dan mentioned, one of the challenges is being able to hit that push to talk button to automate it. So without having some of these external devices, it makes it an even more manual process. You may still be able to do it. You may still be able to send and receive your messages and get that communication out. Again, in this course, we're going to be focusing primarily on the signaling just because of its flexibility. And as we get further in, you'll see us also do things like incorporate things like APRS and using VARA HF or VARA FM, as well as packet, as well as other different forums. So a little preview of what's to come later on in the class. Anything else that we want to do there before we wrap up? Certainly the live stream. We can take a few questions after we close out the live stream, but we've been going for an hour and a half. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. A question did come in. Will there be a Zoom link sent out for the next Zoom meeting? If you are one of the people who have registered before and you got the email that has the Zoom link in it, go ahead and use that same link next week at 2:00 p.m. Pacific time to join us. We will be back here for the next session. We generally open doors about 5 minutes ahead of time. So 2:00 Pacific time, that's about 5:00 on the East Coast. And let's see, what else have I forgotten? Oh, be sure to check on WaveTalkers in the resources section under digital. There's a new dedicated page in there for Winlink, and we will be posting all of the resources for this course in there, and that's open to anyone who wants to go. We will also have this whole session will remain up on WaveTalkers all week long. Anyone's able to hop in and get that. After the week, it'll change over to the next class, and everything gets archived in the courses section of WaveTalkers. All of that is free for anyone who wants to get in there and have a look at it. So do look at the resource page. Chris has done a fabulous job of bringing all of this information together. I remember learning Winlink years ago. There isn't just one single place you can go to learn everything you need. It really does take a variety of resources, and this is one, but we're attempting to aggregate it in one place for you. You'll find a couple of videos if you don't have it installed yet, how to install it, very basic stuff. If you don't have an account yet, you all should have an account. How do you get a Winlink account? Very basic stuff, but you got to start at some point. So preview of next week. What are we going to tackle next week?
So for those of you that aren't installed, as was mentioned on the WaveTalkers website, David and Chris have both produced some really great videos on walking you through the process. If you feel like you can hop in there and do it on your own, follow the video, download the application. There's instructions on how to do that, get it installed. There's instructions on how to get into the settings to set it up for, your name, your call sign, your information. Try to tackle that as we get into the next week's sessions. We're going to get folks starting to send traffic and back and forth and do some more, not so much directed nets, because there's 150 people here that would take, the entire session, but at least get you guys sending messages and looking at the options that are out there. And we'll start to touch on the next steps, the RF, what's available, how do you connect to a radio. And again, for the most part, in the class per se, for the major sessions, we're really going to focus kind of on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. We will talk a little bit about the HF stuff. That's a little more challenging. It's a little harder to do with this number of people, but we should be able to get everybody going on the 2 meter connections, whether it's packet or VARA, and we'll dive into what those things mean in a little bit more detail next week.
And I would say let's have some homework assignment as well. If everyone could get yourself set up on Winlink and send each of the members of our team here, myself, W6AH, Dan, NR6V, David, KK6DA, and Dave, W0DHG. If you could send us a Winlink check-in from the forms. If you have a hard time getting through the forms, go ahead and just send us a message to let us know that you're out there. Send it to each of us. For those of you in the Zoom session, Dave just put it in the chat, all of our call signs. If you please send us a message. That way we have a direct communication. From now on, we'll start communicating with you through Winlink directly. Just to point out here on WaveTalkers, up here in the resources section, you can click on resources now, and over there is digital. There's the link for Winlink, and right here inside of Winlink. So if you're looking for how to install it, you click that right there, and there we go. There's the video for installing Winlink, setting up your account. You click on that, and it just shows up. We've got the text directions here as well, and we will be adding more information to this page as we go through the class. So be sure to check back on a regular basis. You can just toggle these by clicking those, and they will disappear back up there. So with that, I will say thanks everyone for attending this first class of our Winlink Basics for MCOM. And we'll hang around here for a little while inside of the Zoom, but I'm going to go ahead and turn off the live stream. Thanks to everyone who joined us. We did get people joining us from around the planet. So we had folks joining us from Asia, in Singapore and Canada and the US and many other countries and locations around the world. So thanks everyone for joining us. And with that, I will say 73, and I'm going to shut off all of the live streams at this point.